Hi everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Jen and I'm the Charity Marketing Associate here at CanadaHelps. So our webinar today is going to be led by Cindy Wagman and Aine McGlynn from the Good Partnership. And this is an organization that helps small charities by supporting their fundraising. Cindy and Aine will introduce themselves fully in a few short minutes, but first we just need to go through a few quick housekeeping slides. Okay, so for those of you who are new to CanadaHelps, we are a social enterprise focused on helping charities. We provide charities with open access to our affordable online fundraising platform and training so they can better connect themselves with people who support them. And for donors, we offer a one-stop shop for donating and fundraising for any registered Canadian charities online. Since 2000, over 1.8 million Canadians have donated through CanadaHelps, and together we've raised over $900 million in donations. And now I will pass the mic over to Cindy, who will get us started with the webinar.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? We're good? All right. So, good afternoon. Really excited to have everyone here. I've lost my control panel, so I can't see anything right now. I don't know if we could do a little tech quickie here, but there we go. Now I can see my control panel. I just want to make sure that that we could get any questions and all of that. All right, so there we go. We are good. So first of all, welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. We know how busy things are running a small nonprofit and charity in Canada, and we really appreciate all that you do and your time being here, and we promise to make this full of really helpful, practical information. I want to start today with a story. So about 2 years ago, we got a call from an organization, I think around November 27th, and they really wanted help to get their year-end appeal out. Now, this was November 27th. We didn't have the bandwidth to help them, and to be honest, at that point, I really doubt we could do so in a meaningful way. But here's what we saw happen. First, they brought in someone to write the appeal, and with only a few days turnaround, there really wasn't time for anyone to craft a compelling story. So the appeal was generic, vague, and really lacked emotional resonance. And of course, the person who wrote it didn't really understand fundraising best practices. So the letter was full of jargon and not at all donor-centric, which is a term that we love to throw around, and we'll talk about that a little later. But there was no time for the staff to become familiar with the particular nuances of fundraising language. And with more lead time, we know that a more compelling and effective letter could have been crafted. So it was rushed off to the mailhouse with no time to think about grouping their donors and segmenting their lists and all these other wonderful fundraising terms that we'll explain. And guess what happened next? Nothing. Crickets. They didn't even make back their very small investment. So if any of this sounds familiar, the last-minute work, that crunch of urgency, the inability to incorporate some best practices, the lack of results, well, you are in the right place. Today we're going to walk you through step-by-step your year-end fundraising plan. And at the end, you'll have a clear roadmap with timelines, best practices, and special tips to help you nail your year-end appeal. Are you ready? So, my name is Cindy Wagman, and I'm the President and CEO of the Good Partnership. And as Jen said, we help small nonprofits with their fundraising so they can focus on changing the world. I love small charities, as does my team, and we think you're doing incredibly important work. And I know you're doing it with really tight resources and often on the edge or even just a little across the line of burnout. So thank you again for all that you do.
So hi, I'm Aine McGlynn. I'm the COO of the Good Partnership. I cut my teeth as a fundraiser for small organizations who had to do a whole lot with a lot of very little. So I always found myself kind of frustrated by fundraising webinars sometimes and courses because their content always seemed to be really geared towards big organizations. And as a leader of a little shop, I didn't find very many resources that were right-sized. And I think that that's what sets our work at the Good Partnership apart. We exist solely to support the small organizations like you who are punching way above your weight class. So before we begin, I'd like you to make sure that you have your plan template downloaded. Otherwise, you can take notes and fill it in after. But I'm going to be showing you how to fill it in as we go, and even giving you some time to do so. So here's the link there up on your screen. So feel free to pop over and download that template so that you can follow along as we go. So while I give you a minute to download it, if you'd like to take a minute to introduce yourselves, just let us know in the comments where you're joining us from, what organization you work for, and of course what your role is. So just take a couple seconds to pop that into the comments box or the conversation, and we'd be delighted to hear. Okay, so welcome again to everybody from all those various points across the country. I think we are ready to dig in. So, year-end giving. How would you rate your year-end giving appeal and process? If you want to let us know in the poll, that would be awesome, and we can get a sense of where the group feels that you are. I think that poll should be popping up right now. So we're asking you to reflect on your year-end giving appeal and process, and let us know how you would rate it. From very confident to worried, no process. Oh, we've got the results are coming in. This is exciting, folks. Really, a lot of the majority are in the unsure and the worried. Very few are in the very confident, which makes sense. Otherwise, why would you be here? You'd have it all sorted out. We are here for you all who are in that in those other categories, and hopefully we can help bump your confidence up along the way. And then also, in the chat, if you'd like to populate the chat with some reflections about what areas of the giving appeal you feel like you're struggling the most with. So if you want to pop some comments or reflections in there throughout the course of the webinar, Cindy and I can do our best to address those really specific struggles and challenges. Okay, so first thing I need to tell you, and this is evident as the polls come in, you are not alone. You on the other end of this webinar are not alone. You are joined by hundreds of other people who are here with you today on this call who are feeling the same way, and that's why we're here. And I know that when I speak specifically to small organizations, the feedback that I always hear is that they feel a lot better knowing that there's other organizations who are also feeling the same kind of pain, right? Misery loves company, so they say. But seriously, the big shops, they do amazing work, but they consume a lot of bandwidth. And there's no shortage of stories about how they run their year-end giving appeals. There's no shortage of firms that are there to make sure that they take all that money and invest it into marketing campaigns, and we see them very publicly asking for contributions to their causes. But we all know that that's really expensive, and as a small organization, the model for success for those big shops is quite frankly abstract and unrealistic. And I would imagine that many of you felt like I did, which is to say you feel kind of isolated and alienated by strategies that really aren't right-sized for you. So just know that today you're surrounded by other people like you, and we're here for you. This is a safe, friendly community. So feel free to be frank about the challenges that you're having. So to the giving piece, we all know that year-end giving is really important for organizations. That's actually a massive, massive understatement. Year-end giving is mega, mega important to all charities. And I'm wondering if you ever really even thought about, how much of your annual fundraising revenue comes in during the last 60 days of the calendar year. You might not know the specifics for your organization, but CanadaHelps has some great statistics that suggest that 32% of dollars donated through the CanadaHelps platform are made in December alone, with 11% of annual donations coming in during the last 4 days. Isn't that crazy? Like, you could be raising as much as 50% of your annual donations through your year-end campaign. And you probably know this, which is hopefully why you're here today. So let's get down to brass tacks, some actionable steps that you can take to raise more money this year end, and hopefully in a calm, organized, and strategic way, which I think we can all agree sounds pretty nice.
So before I go forward, I just want to say thank you all. We're getting lots of great responses in the chat. Because there's the system, there's a little bit of delay, so we can't acknowledge them all right away, but we are seeing who you are and where you're from. You know, Brenda, Terry, Edward, Judy, Jan, Terry, Natalie, thank you all for sharing where you're joining us from and what your challenges are. So here is what today is going to look like. We're going to explore the most fundamental things you need to be doing for your year-end appeal, and we'll call those the foundation. Then we're going to go into layers of ideas and practices that can help your program perform even better. And these are kind of like the nice to have. They're not mandatory. And finally, you're going to have access to the micro plan template that we shared with you earlier. And this is like the specifics. It's plug and play. You should be able to follow this along for the next few months or 12 weeks, and hopefully that will make the process much less stressful for you and, of course, financially beneficial. So imagine if we're making cupcakes. You've got the cake batter as the foundation, all of your toppings, which you can layer on as much as or as little as you like. You know, maybe one nice layer if that's all you can manage, or if you're like my 4-year-old kid, you're putting on all the things. And then, of course, the fundraising plan template is your recipe. It's really important. I want you to start where you are today. Don't worry if you can't do everything. I mean, it would be great if you can, but it's really not that realistic. So we want to share with you a bunch of options, and we want you to pick the ones that you can most effectively implement today. And then as you grow, hopefully you'll be able to do more and more. So that's pretty much the structure of what we're going to cover for your year-end plan. So let us know in the chat if you are good to go. And we're going to start with the foundation. So there are 3 parts of the foundation, which Anya's going to talk about. The first is the theme, then stories, and then a 3-step process of thank, ask, thank.
So let's think of your year-end appeal as like a mini campaign in and of itself. And what does every great campaign need? Well, it needs a theme, it needs a tagline, and it needs a call to action. So theme, tagline, call to action. Write it on a Post-it note and pop it on your bathroom mirror, and remember those 3 things because they're really key. So starting from now until the year end, everything that you should be communicating with your donor should fit together and support each other under the theme that is constitutive of this mini campaign. So you're going to repeat messaging several times over, all with the aim of relating back to your stated theme. It may at some point feel pretty repetitive, but actually a lot of research demonstrates that people need to hear the same message about 8 times before it sticks. I was listening to the radio recently and heard an advertisement about bestcations or something, which is a totally made-up term that the marketers use, but they repeated it 7 times within a 20-second radio spot. Emphasis, repetition, it matters. It's what makes it stick. So here's an example of a mini campaign that we created with one of our clients, Margaret's Place, and we decided that the theme should be warmth. Margaret's works with a lot of vulnerable populations who are street involved, mostly due to mental health challenges. So we landed on warmth as a really evocative theme for Margaret's. And under that theme, you know, we landed on the fact that during the holiday season, we're fueled by the comfort and warmth of our homes and our loved ones. that Margaret's provides sources of warmth for those living on the streets or living with mental health challenges who've been abandoned by friends and families. The theme of warmth aligns with Margaret's programs and services, and not to mention the physical warmth provided by their housing projects and referrals, and as well as the hot meals that are provided by the drop-in centers. And these, this speaks to the emotional warmth provided by the drop-in staff. So Margaret's tagline, given the theme, is "Give the gift of warmth." The call to action that's associated with that tagline and that theme is "Give the gift of warmth this holiday season and support someone like Greg who once needed a helping hand and a place to lay his head." Then we broke down the giving amounts. $15 a month will warm 3 bellies this winter season. $50 a month will warm 5 sets of weary bones. $100 a month will give the warmth of a new apartment. So you can see we're continuing to land on the theme of warmth in all of the calls to action. So as I'm talking and as we're reflecting here, if you'd like to go ahead and make a few notes about what your theme might be, what might be the tagline that resonates and connects to that theme, and what's the call to action that brings the whole thing together. Obviously, don't worry if you're not coming up with gold right now. I'm asking you on the spot, but maybe jot down the first 3 thoughts that come to your mind and come back to it and refine it. So here's the big $1 million question. Does anyone want to share their initial thoughts about their theme right now for some feedback? So go ahead and share your potential theme or tagline in the comments, and we'll see if we have any feedback. So I have Emily Bush talking about her theme being family. That's a great broad theme. There's a whole lot of ways that you can expand that. I have Stephanie Mock talking about a 40th anniversary appeal. Oh, so that'll be interesting. So let's get more specific on that. So beyond the anniversary, what is the term, the theme, the phrase that connects an anniversary celebration with your work? I have some themes around nutrition, helping Cubans help their animals. Wow, that's really specific and really interesting. Super cool. Wow, it's coming in fast and furious. So we're going to take a look at all of these comments, and hopefully we'll sort of get back to you. But really, as specific as possible. An anniversary campaign is a really important time. But what specifically about your organization are you celebrating in that anniversary season? Help us help the environment. I like that. That's great. Lots of really great ideas. Okay, so you all get the point. This is great.
So the next thing we want to talk about are stories. So there are some really compelling reasons why you should use stories as the foundation to your fundraising. And this is true whether you're talking to people in person, to using your communication materials and asks, or at events. And most people in their experience, no one understands that stories can open people up. They can change minds and build empathy. But listening to stories actually activates our brains in a really cool way. So, of course, when we listen to a story, the language part of our brain starts to light up. And that's the part that lights up if we're listening to a story or anyone talking. We're hearing words, that part of our brain is active. But the really cool part is there's another part of our brain that lights up when we hear stories in particular outside of other language. And that part is the part of the brain that tells us we're experiencing something. So to our brain, when we hear stories, it's like we are in the story. We are experiencing the story, which is pretty cool, I think. And there's some really good research around fundraising to back this up. Stories actually increase generosity. So according to Network for Good, donors tend to give twice as much when presented with a story about an affected individual as opposed to reading abstract numbers of the overall problem. So how do you tell a good story? A successful story should be about one person. It should offer both a problem or a struggle as well as a solution. It should express urgency, And it should be written in a really easy to understand and conversational style, and it should evoke emotion. So you can use this as a little checklist when you're writing your stories, but they're really important. We see a lot of organizations leave out various pieces, and it doesn't make it as strong. So for example, you might say, well, we're more formal, so we don't want a conversational style. But time and time again, it is proven that conversational style and a personal touch to any appeal performs better consistently. So really try and edit to make sure you're capturing all of these things. And I also want to emphasize a story is not a testimonial. So we often see people confuse the two, where they'll have like a quick paragraph and, you know, this organization is so great, they helped me do that. A story takes the reader on a journey. And in your story, for your appeal, that hero of the journey should be the donor. And the subject can be, you know, one of your clients or someone that your organization has helped. But in other words, your story should tell the donor how they did or can help that protagonist, the clients of your organization. And there are so many great resources that can help you do this. We're not going to spend too much time on it today, but here are some of our favorites. Vanessa Chase-Lokshin is also Canadian, brilliant, really great storyteller. Donald Miller is a genius, and he really gives you framework on how to tell a good story. And then Agents of Good, also Canadian, are fantastic in building resources on how to tell compelling donor-centered stories.
So we're going to dive into a very specific story and share with you a before and an after to highlight some of what Cindy's speaking about in terms of stories. So here's what one of our clients used last year in their appeal. It was titled Landing on My Feet. You can read along with me if you'd like. So my name is Lena. I'm 31 years old and I've been diagnosed with schizophrenia. 4 years ago, I came to Toronto from Calgary to escape an abusive relationship. I had to leave my home and my job as an executive assistant. I had no job, no income, and no support. I stayed in a shelter for a week but ended up hospitalized for several months. I was fortunate enough to be discharged into Margaret's transitional housing, where I found a safe haven to begin my recovery. The structure of the house helped me boost my sense of stability. I was able to continue my education and develop significant and important social supports in the community. Today, with the help of Margaret's, I have moved into my own apartment and work part-time as an administrative assistant. So surely this is an amazing transformation that Lena has made with Margaret's support, but can you see the way that this reads more like a testimonial? It doesn't really tell the story of where Margaret's intervened along her journey from you know, escaping an abusive relationship to you know, being successful and back on her feet in a new city. It doesn't give the donor the opportunity to visualize him or herself in the place where they can actually help Lena achieve the goals that that she'd like to achieve. It lacks a depth and emotion, and I don't know if you feel this way, but I certainly do that I don't feel that I'm there with her. I feel like I'm reading a reflection, but not a story. So here's how we've crafted a story for use for Margaret's year-end campaign. Which is maybe hopefully a little bit different. As a reminder, the theme of this mini campaign is warmth. So here we go. Bear with me. It's a little bit long, but I feel like it's worth the investment. So Greg's story is like many others who've set foot through Margaret's doors in search of warmth. Greg's skin, weathered by the elements, had deep creases around his eyes and mouth. His tall frame, once solid and upright, was bent as he hunched towards the floor. Approaching 60 years old, Greg had never had a place to call his own and struggled for years with mental illness. Over the last decade, Greg lived on the streets of Toronto and in tents in Western Canada. With your support, Margaret's was able to find him permanent supportive housing. This was a triumphant moment. However, for people like Greg, this feeling of security was fleeting. Just as you and I would have a hard time adjusting to living on the cold streets, when someone who is formerly homeless transitions into housing, a lot of adjustments have to take place. For Greg, who suffers from mental illness, feeling Feelings of hopelessness and isolation set in, not to mention that Greg was in poor health. He would often forget about appointments due to memory loss, and he hadn't seen a doctor in over 20 years. But that's exactly when your generosity and the work of Margaret's staff kicked in. First, Greg and his caseworker addressed the eviction notice. Greg was connected to legal support and given a court hearing date. His support worker made sure he attended. He also connected Greg to a local food bank and other supports to offer a sense of stability and warmth in his life. Greg's transition is a work in progress that you are part of building. Small signs of progress are made every month. Greg has jumped more hurdles with the support from Margaret's in a month than in the 7 months he spent alone. Without you, Greg would likely be back on the cold, lonely streets right now, curling up his fingers in his tattered gloves, waiting for the frost to settle into his bones for a long, cold winter. Obviously, there's more to the actual letter that we crafted, but can you see or hear the difference here? I hope that you're able to see the donor as the hero in this story. You know, in the first story, the donor's role or the hero is non-existent. They're not mentioned. They're not referred to. Meanwhile, in the second story, the donor is really positioned as the agent of change. And that's what donors want to feel when they're giving their money to your organization. The first story also doesn't make specific links between the elements of the story and the donor's role, while the second story makes really one-to-one immediate connections between the protagonist's journey and the donor's investment. So when the protagonist arrives at an obstacle, the donor is encouraged to think about how they can help remove it. And when the protagonist succeeds, the donor is credited with that success. So the second story really creates feeling as well. It uses visceral words like cold, pain, anxiety, joy, relief. These are cues that trigger empathetic responses from the reader. So I want you to take a minute now and maybe just jot down a couple notes in your plan around a story or two that you think would bring really great life to your theme. If you can't think of any great stories right now, don't worry about that, but maybe consider making some time in the next few weeks to interview your program staff or clients who you have a good relationship with, who your organization has served, and ask them to get specific. Don't let them land on, I feel really great engaging the community in change. Ask them specifically to talk to you about a moment, a day. Name the time, name the place, name the people that were there, get as specific as possible. Make them tell you a story where the whole world disappears and you are completely engaged and focused. You know that you've landed on a good story when the first thing you want to do when after it's told to you is you want to go and tell somebody else that same story. That's when you know you've landed on a good story.
So I want to talk about your goals. So funding priorities can be really useful for year-end campaigns. So we all know, and we've all seen those organizations that, buy goat, et cetera, but I know that you need operational money. And I think there are ways to combine the two. So you can definitely keep your appeal general, or you can try to build in some more general asks with a specific call to action. So I want you to fill in the need and the overall goal of your campaign, mini campaign, and then identify a specific ask. So here is an example of one organization, Nellie's, who's here in Toronto, and they provide families escaping domestic violence with the necessities to get back on their feet. So they needed money for back to school. That was the focus or the theme of their campaign. And so they built that into specific asks. So $80 will help children start the fall. $40 will provide a woman with a basic kit. $120 will allow you to support both programs, etc. And these are things that are still operational. They're things that you'd be spending on anyways. You're just capturing that information in a way that's compelling for the donor. So I want you to start to fill that in terms of, what is the goal of the mini campaign. And you can even set, we're going to talk a little bit about setting financial goals overall, but, where do you need that money and how do you translate that into a specific ask? So I want you to think about setting actual goals for the campaign, both financial and non-financial. This is one of the most common pitfalls we see with small organizations, is that they either have completely unrealistic goals or no goal at all. So do you already know your goal? Here's some food for thought. Oops, sorry. In my experience, ambitious overall fundraising growth for an organization is 20%, and that's on the high end. According to recent reports by the Rideau Foundation and Imagine Canada, giving in Canada has been flatlining. So you'll have to find a balance between that ambition and modesty when it comes to your goal setting. So I know you all know about SMART goals, so I'm not going to go into that today, but I want you to measure your results. So here are some things you can think about beyond just dollars raised. Sorry, missing a slide. So I want you to think about how many new donors you have, how many repeat donors, how many donors who gave in the past but not last year, how many donors increased their donation amount from before, how many annual donors converted to monthly donors. So there are so many different ways that you can use metrics. Of course, a lot of it will depend on your systems. A lot of them are the most easy to report on when you have a decent database, but some of them you can even use Excel to be able to compare and report on your goals. So I want you to think about not just how much money you want to raise, but what other goals you want to achieve with your year-end fundraising plan.
So let's talk about tactics. When you're thinking about your campaign, I'd like you to break it down into 3 parts. First, you want to thank, then you want to ask, and then you want to thank again. So thank, ask, thank. That should be your mantra. Okay. So the first thank. I know that you're ultimately trying to get to an ask, but before you begin to think about asking, I want you to send a special thank you to your donors. So this doesn't have to be elaborate, but you know, if you have a group of donors that's a reasonable number, you can divide that list between your staff or your volunteers. And if you have the time to be able to craft a little handwritten note or even just a handwritten sentence on the bottom of a printed postcard, that is fantastic, and it goes a long way. You could also consider doing a thankathon where you and a couple of members of your board pick up the phone and call your donors. Maybe you order a pizza on lunch over lunch one day and do it with your staff, or it's 3 o'clock on a Friday and you get to work and let everybody leave an hour early. Make it fun and engaging. It's a great way to make everybody on the team feel as though they're involved and connected to fundraising. I've also seen a number of organizations who are using Giving Tuesday as an opportunity to say thanks. There's a whole lot of asking that happens on Giving Tuesday, so why not sort of flip the script a little bit and use that as the day when your donor is going to be thanked instead of asked by you, and that might be a nice, refreshing change.
So after that first thank, and I really want to emphasize, it is important. Don't skip that step. Then you're kind of in a place where you can ask. So your ask should consist of a minimum of 2 parts, your mail and your email. And I'm going to talk about more on how you can layer on top of that, but those are the core things that you need to do. And mail letters still perform really well, and there's some other great ways to mail out letters inexpensively. There's some, it doesn't have to be through a fancy mail house. You can do it in-house if your list is not big, but it is still important. But of course, email and digital is growing in importance, and most of all, I want you to meet your donors where they are. So look at your donor list. If they're all giving online, you can focus on email, but I wouldn't lose the mail piece just yet. So what are the elements of a compelling appeal? So start with a thank you, especially if you're asking people who have given to your organization before. You really want them to know that you know that and that you appreciate their ongoing support. Again, that goes back to the conversational and personal style of an of a story and an ask is that you're talking to one person, and the more you can do to make it feel like you know that person, the better. Then, of course, the donor as the hero. Make sure your donor sees themselves in the story. It's not about your work as an organization. It's about their impact through giving. So keep that in mind. And I'll say this again, conversational. Does your writing fall into a grade 4 to 6 reading level? It absolutely should. Is it warm, friendly, and easy to understand? And it should be from one person to another. It shouldn't be generic, from we the organization. You can pick who your signatory is. You can be the executive director. It can be a program participant. I've seen really cool examples. I know someone asked about if your charity doesn't involve people but land or water. We've seen birds sign appeals and personifying. I know Humber River Hospital here in Toronto actually created a little avatar for their organization that signs their letters. So there's lots of ways to be creative, but it should be really personal and people should be able to connect to that. And of course, it should be easily digestible. This is one I see a lot. I want you to think of the cadence of your appeal, right? It should feel like a natural conversation. And this is an area where you have permission to break some grammatical rules. And I smile because I see we deal with this on our staff team even sometimes as well, is we know what good writing looks like. We're all, we've all been through various forms of education and taught a certain way. I want you to throw some of those rules out the window with your fundraising appeal and actually think about how you would talk to someone. It's okay to start a sentence with and or but. It's okay if a paragraph is only one sentence. Those are all things that make it personal and compelling and easy to read. We know there's a lot of research to show that people actually don't read these letters start to finish, but you should make it as easy as possible for them to do so. So really think about that cadence of the letter. And breaking up the text in interesting and compelling ways. And then, of course, this is another one that is contentious. You should have a PS at the end of your letter. And I know I've had this conversation with lots of people. PS is an antiquated thing that that existed when we were typing on typewriters and couldn't go back and edit. And of course, that's not an issue anymore. But again, that's how people read your letters, and they look at that PS. And so have a compelling call to action and summary. So if that's the only thing they see, they know what action to take. I also want you to have clear and repeated calls to action. So it's not enough to bury the ask somewhere in the letter in a really soft way, like, oh, please will you support us? You should have a really specific ask in there. Will you make a contribution of X, Y, and Z, or any amount that you can offer? It can support some of the goals or some of the asks that we laid out, $80 will do this, etc. But it doesn't have to, as long as you're asking for something and you're specific. There is research from behavioral economists around giving people 3 choices, which is why often you will see 3 numbers and then any other amount. Typically, people will choose the middle one. So think about your existing donors and how much they currently give. That you might want to anchor your middle number a little bit more than that. But again, you can repeat it in the PS. As Aine mentioned right at the beginning, people remember things when they see it a bazillion times. So we might be sick of it, but they're not. I also want you to keep it personal. So I'm sure you've all gotten these beautifully designed appeals in your mail where the envelope has all these different graphics and calls to action and open now and such inside. And that's great for the big organizations, but it can feel really overwhelming. And actually, there's not enough evidence that I've seen to say that they perform better. So if you have a small list, you can actually handwrite the outside of the envelopes. We do that with our clients all the time. It's much more likely to get open that way. Use a proper stamp instead of your mailing machine. Whatever you can do to keep it really personal both on the outside and on the inside. And we're going to talk about inside and how you can personalize and customize that in a few minutes. And size still matters. So 2 to 4 pages for mailed versions. And I know everyone's going to tell you it should be shorter. No one has that attention span. And, you know, I've heard that my whole career. But again, 2 to 4 pages still performs better. Doesn't mean everyone's reading every single word, but that is how people engage with the content. And so let's give it to them. And if you, again, this is all a really great checklist as you are writing your letter to remember and go through and edit to this.
So after you've sent out your mailing, it's a great idea to follow up with emails. You know, if you're sending out a mailing to one group and an email appeal to another group, you can use practically the same letter for both purposes. But do make sure that you follow up with an email to those who received a paper appeal and, of course, those who received a digital appeal, and then send another 2 follow-up emails. So in total, you're looking at about 4 communications. And ideally, you have a system wherein you can remove anyone who makes a donation from subsequent emails so that they don't receive all 4 communications if they donated after the first communication. But if not, make sure that you add a note somewhere, something along the lines of, if you're receiving this note and you've already made a donation, thank you, your gift has been processed and is being directed to whichever program you're directing it to, or to the organization in general. Just a nice way to make sure that people who have already given are acknowledged. And so then after you've sent out your year-end appeal and as we approach the last few days of the year, I think it's a great idea to send out another 3 to 4 emails, maybe 1 5 days before the end of the year, 1 3 days before the end of the year, and 2 on December 31st. So make sure you're getting those stragglers, those late donations that are bound to come in. And so, like, it's a great example of one that is simple and easy to implement, yet very effective. That example. That allows you to count down to the end of the year. You can add a timer, an email countdown. You can see one that we've used before at motionmailapp.com. So motionmailapp.com, and you can see a timer there that you can use. So I know this is a lot of writing, but if you get started now, it's not going to seem that overwhelming. If you get them done and get them scheduled, then you don't have to think about it at all. And your ask is done.
And I really want to emphasize, you're not creating new content for every single piece of those things. Repeat, repeat, repeat. So finally, the end of that 3-step thank, ask, thank are thank you calls. So I want you to carve out time in your day to do thank you calls within 24 hours of a donation coming in. And it's really simple, but often people don't do it because it's so simple we kind of forget or we don't think it's important. But in this case, simplicity is super important and very, very effective. How effective? According to fundraising researcher Penelope Burke, donors who received a thank you call for their gift within 48 hours gave 39% more their following gift. Yep, you heard that right. 39% increase in donation amount just by getting a heartfelt and prompt thanks. It's pretty amazing, right? So do you think you can do that? Can you commit 20 minutes a day, if that, it might not even be so much, to make the thank you calls for your year-end? It's super easy and really, really important. So if that's all we've covered so far, if you can do all those things and that's all you can manage, that's great. That's the foundation. You've got the base in place. Do that this year, and next year aim to do a little bit more. And definitely you have all this in your plan, and you can map it out and rock your year end. So this is what a sample work back plan looks like in in the plan that you downloaded, and you can look at timelines and what needs to happen and how much you can throw in your cost there, and you're good. Just follow it, plug and play, and you're good to go. So this is what you should be doing at minimum. So do you feel like you can accomplish that? Let me give you a second. Just give us a little yes in the chat. And is there anything that's worrying you? So we have a little poll. So let us know. We'll give you a second. And of course, you might want to fill in some of the notes based on what we talked about. All right. So let's talk about the icing now. These are the extras that add value if you have time. I want you to do what you can, and as I said at the beginning, there's no strict order. Start with what's the most realistic to you, or what you think based on your audience is the most feasible or is going to have the best returns for you. So here are the layers we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about grouping, customization, website takeover, and social media.
So it's really an important tactic to be able to group your donors. So if you have a database, you can do this pretty simply. But if you don't, that's okay. There's still ways to do so. So in fundraising, we call this segmentation, but it's really not as scary or intimidating as it sounds. So the first thing to do is to decide the ways in which you can group your donors. So the easiest way, of course, to group them is based on their past giving levels. So either through your database or on an Excel sheet, simply order and sort based on gift amount. So you can also create a slightly different letter for those who have given a higher amount versus those who have given a lower amount. You can try to use distinct giving amount suggestions based on if they've given more or less last year. So as Cindy mentioned, people tend to click on that, choose that middle option. So if you'd like them to stretch a little bit beyond that $50 gift, then maybe you want to put $100 in the middle. You might also want to pick a group of donors who you want to target for monthly gifts. This is perhaps because they've given more than once over the course of the year or the course of the previous fiscal year. So if you're seeing a donor giving more than once, they're probably a good candidate for a monthly gift. You might also ask an existing monthly donor to increase their donation as part of that appeal. So another important group to not forget about is the donor that we consider a lapsed donor. So that's a donor who gave in the past, but really not in the last 12 to 18 months. So to find those, you can just simply sort your donation information by date. So do you see how you could better target and ask based on these groups? There'll be slightly different messaging involved in someone who hasn't given in 18 months than someone who has given in the last few months. I'm wondering if any of you have tried the segmentation strategy before, and what did you observe? So just let us know in the chat if you've tried segmentation and how that went for you.
So we also want to talk about customization, which is a lot easier than most people think. And one way to customize is through technology, and another is through good old-fashioned handwriting. So this is an example of the technology version, where you're going to take your donor list, and it's going to be, you're going to have the name, address, and anything else you want to pre-populate into an Excel sheet, and then merge it with a document. And you can put any column to merge, so you can say, like, write a sentence here on your personal reason is the example there, but you can put specific gift ranges. You can put something they've supported in the past. As much information that you have, you can definitely pull that in to your letter. But this is another great example. I love this one. Even though it is very hard to read, you can see the handwritten customization. And I definitely recommend this for larger donors. You could do this inside, on the outer envelope, both. We've used Post-it notes. Just make it super personal. And finally, if you have emails going out to some of your higher level donors, or you have a small list, instead of using something like MailChimp, try actually personalize the emails and have it come from your executive director or whoever else might be sending it directly from their computer. All right.
So another thing that you can think about doing is a website takeover. So for the duration of your campaign, and if you use a content management system that you can easily edit, then you can consider adding a few strong words, a few inspiring pictures, and have the donation just one click away for the time in which the campaign is active. We really like this one by Childhood Cancer Canada for their Hero Pose Challenge. A really great example of a website takeover. You also want to make sure that you're aligning all the steps of the donation process. As we know, CanadaHelps makes it really easy for people to make donations online to your charity, but you might not be taking full advantage of all of the tools that the platform has to offer. This is a great opportunity to spend some time customizing and updating the content that is on your CanadaHelps donation page. So here's a great example from CanadaHelps on how you can create a special year-end donation form, including those customized donation levels, so you can really reinforce your ask and make it feel really seamless. So the visuals that they see on your website are also the visuals that they see when they click on the donate link and are taken to the CanadaHelps form. Let's talk a little bit about social media. Social media in and of itself, can be a huge undertaking. Some small charities do it really well. For others of you, I'm sure it feels like an Achilles heel. Whatever your social media IQ, I'm sure that you can find some ways to reinforce that year-end appeal theme through your social media posts. It's really hard to get new donors from social media to donate, but if someone is already an existing donor and is getting that same messaging from mail, email, and also on social, it's a powerful example of that repeat messaging. So you might want to consider budgeting maybe $75 to $100 for some Facebook ads that are specifically targeting people who already like your page, as well as their friends. So that's an easy way that Facebook allows you to target their ads. Really focus on stories and images, and pick one or two social media challenges where your audience is active. This is not a good time to start a brand new strategy, but do think about consistency of message across all platforms. Toronto Humane Society does a really great job of that multi-channel communication strategy. As you can see, these adorable kittens, Ego and Yondu. I received their story as an email campaign, then later saw them on breakfast television, these two cute kittens, and then also on Facebook. I had no intention of becoming a donor, but I did. I mean, look at them.
So finally, at the end of your plan, I want you to take all of the things that you are doing, whether it's definitely it's going to be your mail and email, but whether it's social media, website takeover, customizing your donor forms, and that online experience, put that into a month-by-month deliverable calendar, as you see here, and it's in the plan, and there you go. So I want to end today with something we do with all of our presentations and trainings, and it's an accountability pledge. So working in a small shop, we often work alone, and we're accountable only to ourselves to get things done, and the board, but often it feels like just ourselves. And things get pushed off our plates because something urgent comes up or it's time sensitive, and I totally get it. We've been there. And research shows that if we just think, we generally won't. But if we can, so go ahead and do that. We do have a few minutes left, I think, for questions. And I think we can stick around a little bit if it works for the CanadaHelps team. So with that, we wish you happy fundraising, and I know it takes us a couple of seconds to actually get questions in our feed, so ask away. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that, Cindy and Anya. So I know we've only got 2 minutes on the clock here, so just to be mindful of time, we're just going to go jump into it. But we did notice that people were having trouble downloading the year-end plan template. Just letting you know, we're going to include a link to the PDF in the Canada Helps blog post within 24 hours of this webinar ending. So don't you worry, you'll get that template. So we're going to jump into questions. I'm going to try to speed through this as fast as I can, and hopefully we can get through most of them. We'll take about 5 minutes for the questions, just so we can be mindful of time. So give yourself about till 3:05, maybe 3:07, and hopefully we'll try to get to the important answers out there. So first question, so Cindy's going to be answering. This is from Rania Kotran. Hi, we do fundraising for emergencies, and we have a lot of lapsed donors from years ago. Some of them don't even remember they gave to us. Is it worth trying to reconnect with them? How do we deal with them?
So my favorite answer in fundraising is always, it depends. I would say it is always better if you're trying to build your list of donors to go to lapsed donors before you go outside into the world around you. So before you borrow a list or rent a list or anything like that, if you want to grow your base of supporters, absolutely I would start with your lapsed donors. Doesn't matter if, and you can remind them. Again, it's that, you know, they want to know that you're talking to them. So you can say, it's been a while, you haven't have heard, you know, but we really appreciate your past support, and we, you know, here's a great opportunity to have impact today. So if one of your goals is to try and grow the number of donors you have that are active, I would absolutely start with your lapsed donors before you go anywhere else.
All right, thank you, Cindy. That was a great question from Anya. Next question is from Mina Delwani. My organization does not like to make things personal. They keep editing my personal appeal into a more official appeal. That's a great question. Any tips?
So I think you'll get a copy of this, a replay of this webinar. You can share it. Please share it. It is there to help you in whatever way that means. There is a great book by Jerry Panis on fundraising communications that you can also check out. I usually give it to our clients when we start with them, because that experience is not unique to you. It's nothing you're doing or anything like that. It's just really common. A lot of people look at these things and say, well, I don't like it, so it can't be good. But in fact, we don't like it, but it performs. I don't love the writing I do sometimes, but I know that it's good fundraising. And if you can really focus or test, you know, if they're unsure and you have a big enough list, test 2 letters and see how it goes, but you're not alone with that, and share resources to help get them on the same page.
Thanks, Cindy. So the next question we have is from Cindy Blinston, and she says, we have difficulty with stories as our organization works in prevention. So I guess any tips on that?
Ooh, I kind of want to know a little bit more, if possible, but generally I would say, here's the thing, if you're struggling with understanding how your donors might perceive or see your organization. Before you go out and start to collect stories, go and talk to your donors. Ask them what they find compelling, or try to understand why they give, and find stories that reinforce that. So a lot of times we try and read our donors' minds, but they'll tell you the kind of stories they're looking for if you ask, and that might give you a lot more clarity around the kinds of stories that you can be telling. And can I just say, as a total aside, there's like 3 Cindys already here, or 2 in the room and 1 online. That is very unique. I never am sitting in a room with another Cindy. So that's a total aside. But yeah, talk to your donors before you start to build those stories, and understand what they find compelling and why they give. And that will give you a lot more focus in trying to build that.
Thank you. We've got a question here from Marielle Boutin. And she says, our organization recently went through a rebranding and we have trouble keeping our message consistent. Staff seem to fall into habits of populating communications with messages that aren't in line with our appeal. How can we ensure a consistent messaging?
So understanding that, are your donors engaging with, like, who's getting a letter versus who's hearing from the staff? It takes time for organizations to adapt to new brands and new messaging. I've been through organizations that have done that. Building name changes is a great example where there's legacy in Toronto. We still call the Rogers Centre the Sky Dome. And so in some ways you can't change the internal culture, and that's not your job. I would only worry about what your donors are seeing or experiencing. And to be honest, you're not perfect and you don't have to be, and your organization doesn't have to be perfect. And so unless it's super contradictory and undermining to your new brand or messaging, I wouldn't worry too much about it. And then think about, maybe not in this minute, but think about how you can empower the rest of the staff to be on that same messaging through training and workshops and just connecting with staff on a regular basis and building those relationships.
Great, thank you. And this question now is from Courtney Shannon. And she's asking, what would be a good theme for a volunteer center? I'm struggling to find a good one.
Oh, that is a broad question. I mean, we've seen organizations, we do some work with Volunteer Toronto, which is probably a fairly similar organization, and actually Aine has done a lot of work with volunteer organizations framework, which run the Time Raiser in particular. So I'm just looking at the technology here, but can I port that one to Aine? Do you want to answer that? Because that's sort of your more of your area of experience.
Right, sorry, so I'm going to switch my headset over to Aine because I actually have it. So here's Aine.
Yeah, so volunteerism is that broad umbrella sort of issue, right? So it can be sort of difficult to think about like what a good theme would be. Concentrate on the fact that you are a convener, you are the cause of cause. I'm sure like CanadaHelps could say a lot about what it means to be a cause of causes. So concentrate on that notion of helping everybody on a range of different possibilities. So what seems like a vulnerability in the sense that you're not focused on one specific issue can actually become the strength in this capacity. One of the themes that we used with Framework was about connection, right? So connecting people to causes and causes to people. And so what are some of the, do some brainstorming around what volunteerism accomplishes in a community. It connects people, it builds skills, it provides new connections between people, it obviously helps deliver on mission. So do some of that, sort of ideation exercises and extract from there, that one powerful theme that can work.
All right, so this is Jen again from CanadaHelps. It's a lot of switching around here, but great, thank you. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much to Cindy and Aine for sharing your tips and tricks with us. And as always, thank you to our attendees for joining. Remember, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Have a great day, everyone.